Hey guys, it's Chris coming at you from Podcast 43 Studios on March 17th, 2025. And I'm just recording this little preamble to let people know that the episode that is being released today comes from the Podcast 43 Vault and was specifically recorded on September 25th, 2024. And we have some quite dated news elements in the episode, but I think it really enhances the experience, and I just wouldn't feel right taking them out because I had a real blast recording this one. And next week, we will be returning to our regularly scheduled programming of new releases paired with an old release, and we'll be discussing Steven Soderbergh's Black Bag as well as Alfred Hitchcock's The 39 Steps. But this week, I hope you enjoy a throwback episode of the remake versus original with Nicholas Ray's They Live by Night paired with Robert Altman's Thieves Like Us. So without further ado, please enjoy.
Welcome to podcast 43. Yes, 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 maybe, but yes.
Welcome back to another episode of Podcast 43. I'm your host, Chris Borg, and I'm joined with
Fulton Collins, another host, and we are joined with the amazing.
Atheist.
I'm thinking it's Vincent Prince this evening.
Okay, Vincent
Okay.
Prince. Yeah. Yeah, who
Glad to
never
have you
had
on.
never had on the podcast before. New host or new
Yeah.
co-host Vincent Prince.
New
Yeah.
year, new me.
Yeah, for those in the know, Vincent is the only owner of the only hidden Podcast 43 episode. Old heads know, but
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
secret episode.
the secret episode.
So how's it going? How's it going, Vincent?
Doing great, man. I'm just so glad to be on. I've been like grinding game tape the last couple days, listening in the archive, just like trying to get in the rhythm because you guys play in an odd time signature, you know?
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you. We
true.
appreciate that.
I like to think
Yeah.
that we're kind of like the spiritual successor to rewatchables.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of consider Fulton the Bill Simmons of his generation.
Well, I wanted to have you on. You had some Shannon Sharp energy, and so that's kind of how we wanted to have you on this episode.
Yeah, the unk of podcast 43.
Well, without further ado, a little bit of podcast 43 lore, and it could still come out one day. Let's not, put anything down. But at one point in time, we three got together and really put our minds together on a big Nicholas Ray endeavor. So I think it would be fitting if Vincent, if you'd like to introduce our first movie of our discussion.
Yeah, we'll be talking about They Live by Night, the debut feature film by Nicholas Ray. Really glad to talk about it. It's Nicholas Ray is probably one of the few directors that I have a pretty good working knowledge of. And it's great to talk about him because when you look at the numbers, he's not as widely viewed as the reputation might suggest. Um, for a guy who was an auteur, really his most popular films kind of live and die by the actors James Dean and Humphrey Bogart. So glad to talk about one that doesn't exactly have that kind of star persona overtaking it.
Yeah, and it's funny as a debut film, he didn't really coast off of the success of this film at all because it wasn't released in America until much later, right? Because of the Howard
Well,
Hughes's acquisition of RKO Pictures.
yeah, that's not necessarily true. So essentially, what happened is I think it's in the summer of 1947. They shoot They Live by Night. And before that, Nicholas Ray had gotten in with RKO through John Houseman, who people probably know from being Orson Welles' producer on Citizen Kane. And Houseman also brought Nicholas Ray to Hollywood. Um, Orson Welles and Nicholas Ray, both two Wisconsin guys. There's a lot of parallels there if you look
Yeah.
throughout the biography. But anyway, they shoot it in 1947. And because of various power struggles at RKO, it gets shelved. And then there's also problems with the censors, both at the script stage and in the post-production stage. So it sits on the shelf until 1948, has a positive test screening, sits for another year, and then eventually it screens in Great Britain, then the United States, and then makes its way to France in 51. But in the interim between these 4 years, Nicholas Ray had already kind of gotten around. People had seen this movie. People knew him in town. He hung out with a lot of famous people. He was a regular at Gene Kelly's house, and that's also part of how he got involved in communist politics in his time in Hollywood. And it was in the interim of development hell where Nicholas Ray met Humphrey Bogart, and they made that partnership with Knock on Any Door and eventually In a Lonely Place. And when They Live by Night is released in the United States, Nicholas Ray is shooting In a Lonely Place.
Mm.
Yeah.
So he's
That
made he would that was his fourth film or fifth film, I believe, right? Because there's this Born to Be Bad, A Woman's Secret, Lonely Place, Knock on Any Door. So yeah.
Oh, Jesus. Well, without further ado, I guess just to kind of hop into the backstory, like it's also adapted by a novel. Have either of y'all read the novel? I'm kind of interested to pick it up now, but
I
I was
have
just
not.
curious.
I
No.
own it, but haven't read it. It's quite
Okay.
short.
Yeah. Very cheap on Amazon if any listeners are not that we're affiliated in any which way, but you can find it anywhere. But you know, regardless, but just to start, I guess, just to do like a general plot overview, because I mean, both of them are pretty close, but they have two very different ways of getting to the end point, I'll say. But so with the first film, They Live by Night, we have our lead played by Farley Granger, who plays Bowie, and then the love interest is Kichi. And so Bowie is with T-Dub and Chickamauga. And they're kind of on the run, kind of bank robbers, and through a series of events ends up meeting Kichi. Bowie ends up meeting Kichi and they fall in love, and it's kind of a doomed romance from the start. It's a love on the run story. I guess kind of where did y'all want to start with this film in particular?
Hmm. Well, I guess what I really enjoy about this film is that it seems incredibly just bleak from the beginning. Any type of moment that's supposed to be of happy that's supposed to be even remotely happy is always undercut by this kind of like this deep feeling of just like despair. And I think like it kind of shows through their relationship through Kichi and Bowie's relationship. They're just kind of like going through the motions and almost kind of like speed running this relationship because they don't know how much time they have. Like they fall in love, they immediately get married, they go on a little bit of a honeymoon, but it's always because they're trying to run from, this untimely demise of their
Hmm.
relationship and also of their lives too.
Yeah. It definitely the fatalism and I mean the general negative outlook is it really is a piece of the Great Depression. And it is a lot about the material conditions that give rise to these folks. Before Nicholas Ray ever had any aspirations to really be a film director throughout the New Deal. He worked with the WPA and mostly went
Mm-hmm.
around the southern United States recording folk music. He was one of the first people to ever record Leadbelly. And was
Wow.
also personal acquaintances with Woody Guthrie, which is, going down the road feeling bad, is playing in the car when they set the car alight, and Woody Guthrie used to pass out drunk and sleep on the lawn at Nick Ray's house when he lived in Washington, D.C. They could never get Woody to sleep inside. He always wanted to sleep outside. So you really have to view this movie first and foremost through that. And it is interesting because whenever people talk about it, it becomes this very like touchy-feely, ooey gooey, partially because that's, the way the French critics interpreted it. You think about Truffaut referring to Johnny Guitar as the beauty and the beast of Westerns, right? That kind of view of these Nicholas Ray films kind of takes away from that kind of more grounded, almost anthropological, maybe is the word I'm trying to search for, function.
Mhm.
I, it was, yeah, very very inspired by like the cinematography feels very inspired by like kind of the Dust Bowl photographs
Yeah.
that yeah
Yeah, I
were
mean, just to highlight that, I mean, I've because this is a second watch for me, and I mean, it was beautiful because me and Chris watched this like a year or two ago or something, and it was beautiful then, but like a lot of the imagery really like struck me very, very hard on this viewing. I forgot just how well composed everything is and how much they're really like playing with shadows a lot, and I just found it to be very impactful. I will admit I did kind of fall into um kind of viewing it as a very like romantic like it feels very like like because it's made during the classic Hollywood era, and so like that kind of amped up emotion and amped up romanticism like really stuck with me on this viewing too. um the fatalism is so nicely like composed in this film. Like I do love that kind of a doomed relationship, and Bowie's just constantly like outrunning his past troubles with the law, and you always know where it's going to end. Um, and so yeah, I guess that's what I had to
eh,
say at the moment. Sorry.
you always know that it's gonna end, but it doesn't make it any less impactful. Like
Mhm.
knowing that I agree. Is the second time that I've seen this movie as well, and yeah, I found it to be basically like near perfect with how everything
Yeah.
works so well as a narrative. And just I thought that that scene, especially where he's lying on the bed and the camera's behind the the headboard of the bed, and you kind of have these like bars that all that symbolize like a jail cell almost, was really excellently composed.
Something, and you don't really get this as much in the rest of the filmography. Maybe you get it a little bit in On Dangerous Ground, which was shot by the same cinematographer as They
Mhm.
Live by Night. Um, so much of this movie is shot pretty tight. There's not much of that, let's let's lock the camera down at the knee and hold it and maybe pan to the left and the right. You see that? You don't see that as much here. A lot of it is in relatively tight. And the reason why it feels so compositionally powerful is because a lot of the times it is using sound and suggestion inside these tight frames of key
Yeah,
things that are happening, or these kind of elisions and obfuscations. Like, think about when Chickama and T-Dub run out of the bank and try and scramble into the car handheld from inside the car. Um, and
yeah.
it's very distinct from that classical era. And it does kind of like Truffaut also wrote that this, and I think it's the Robert Wise Born to Kill, are the most Bressonian of American films.
The most
And with the
bristle.
way but they are. This is a
Yeah,
Bressonian film. Think about how much of this film, like key events happen, and oh, what's the image? Oh, it's Farley Granger from the shoulders up, and his face takes up like 80% of the screen, and there's some sound. There's
yeah,
so many key moments that hinge on
yeah.
that exact formula.
No, just yeah, all the times where the camera's just close up on both Farley Granger and Kathy O'Donnell's face, and as they're just like looking at each other and
Yeah.
just sharing glances, and there's just barely anything else in the frame, is yeah, you're totally right. So I guess Something that I've always thought about since I watched this movie a couple years ago is that like um I felt like almost like there's this like underlying subtext almost where it's like um I would say it's like kind of like a queer subtext of like uh these people aren't are afraid to like show their love for each other, and it almost feels like it's like kind of a like covertly like queer film, like as if like they're like so like they're a straight couple, but they're scared of showing their love for each other because of these external factors and stuff, and just how like Nicholas Ray was bisexual himself. And I was just wondering if like you ever felt that read on the film at all, or if like you picked up on any of those maybe.
I mean, it's definitely throughout the filmography.
Yeah.
I mean, most famously, probably Rebel Without a Cause and Sal Mineo and
Yeah.
James Dean, and to a lesser extent, Kurt Jurgens and Richard Burton in Bitter Victory. That's also there. I'm sure there's ones I'm forgetting at the moment. I don't really feel that here. I'll be honest with you, Chris.
Okay. Okay.
But I get what you mean about like it's like a forbidden love, and it also comes loaded with that because of Farley Granger's bisexuality too, and the fact that he played a couple, iconic queer-coded roles in other films around the same time. So I see it.
Okay.
And yeah, but I hadn't considered it before.
Okay. Okay. What about you, Fold?
Yeah, I hadn't really considered that
Okay.
either.
Well,
But then again, I mean, I could watch it again and probably, pick
uh,
up on more. I just hadn't really taken that in. But
yeah.
just to, I guess, is another like through line into into the rest of Nicholas Ray's filmography. I mean, Vincent, please correct me if I'm wrong, but you kind of do you have like a familial unit kind of in Disintegration, like the rough kind of camaraderie that bands Bowie and Teed Up and Chickamauga together is disintegrated throughout the film. And I know you always kind of have a play like between like the patriarchal figure and
Hmm.
the son. That's also another common theme in his filmography. Um, and I do love that the Chickamauga gets very mad at him because the media is kind of latching on to Bowie.
Yeah.
They call him like Bowie the boy
Mhm.
or Bowie the kid or something like that. And I love that he's like, yeah, they keep fucking talking about you, but I'm the one fucking planning it all. And I love that in both versions, even more in the remake, which we'll talk about soon. But yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, no, you're definitely right. I think it was, and I mean, really what Nicholas Ray's films are about, most of them are because of the disintegration of the family unit. The films are actually about the surrogate family units that form in their
Yeah.
place.
Mhm.
Whether that's the weird menage a trois, but also surrogate mother and father trio in Rebel Without a Cause, or the Lusty Men with Robert Mitchum, who was almost in They Live by Night. He wanted to play Chickamauga,
Oh, that
and
would
he
have been
like
awesome.
really he like
Mm.
yeah, but he would have taken over the movie. Like I mean, it could
Yeah.
have been an iconic performance, but
Hmm.
Farley Granger, I love him. He's beautiful, but I don't think he
Hmm.
could put up with the raw energy of
Yeah.
a 1948 Robert Mitchum.
Yeah.
Or even like bigger than life. You have like the family unit being completely torn,
Disintegrating. Yeah, there's not as much of a
disintegrating.
surrogate one there. So I was kind of, or
No, well,
Robert Ryan and On Dangerous Ground finding love with Ida Lupino. I mean, Serge Danny, two Cahiers du Cinema critics. Serge Danny said that all of Nicholas Ray's films are about a young adopted man rebelling against an older man who adopted him. And Francois Truffaut said that every Nicholas Ray movie is about a man who lashes out with violence and is kind of a arrested development, and he's redeemed by the love of a woman. And kind of those two things together, that's They Live by Night, and also
yeah,
a lot of the films, right?
Hmm.
yeah. No, I mean, I definitely agree with Truffaut's statement much more because yeah, like because bigger than life kind of throws a wrench in the first one. But yeah, it's like always like these kind of like troubled these troubled men that and and I think that's like something that really draws me to Nicholas Ray's films as well, is that he's able to kind of like analyze like, traditional masculinity and critique
Yeah.
it through his filmography in a way that not a lot of other directors at the time were doing. So
Yeah, and I think the movies are great because anyone can get something different out of them. You look at the great filmmakers, Godard, he got sort of the pop art sensibility and the Technicolor he dedicated Made in USA to Nicholas Ray in part as a result. If you look at Rivette, he saw it as kind of a loose improvisational method that often yielded happy accidents, like in his own films. Particularly, Rivette was a fan of The Lusty Men, and if you look at Romer, he saw it as kind of a classical retelling of myths. He talks about Rebel Without a Cause as a retelling of Sid and Ajax, which you kind of see in Romer's kind of novelistic, carefully structured films. And then Truffaut gets that kind of demented lyricism. So there's so much there for people. And it's really interesting because he's a guy that got undervalued and then kind of overvalued, and now he's undervalued again.
uh,
Nobody fucking watches these movies. And partially because a lot of the key ones aren't available. But even the big ones that are available,
I mean, this
yeah.
this movie isn't, you can't rent this movie.
Hmm.
As unfortunate as it is. I mean, Criterion put out that restoration, of course, but like it's not streaming anywhere, and the only copy that's available like streaming is a like really crappy like 240p like YouTube upload. So, um
Yeah, like
This one
I
is
like
surprisingly more accessible
um
than the latter
uh
one.
I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt, but Eric Adams just got indicted.
Wait, what?
No.
Yeah, they just
No,
indicted.
dude, what?
Yeah, yeah, like it happened like
Read
five
Eric
minutes ago.
Adams till it's backwards. Oh my God.
Dude, they can't keep us down.
It's so fucked up.
Dude,
I'm
I
leaving
just
this
saw
in.
oh my dude.
uh, first sitting mayor of New York City to ever get indicted.
Dude. First sitting mayor of New York City to blow hookah with French Montana. First to get indicted. That's all I'm
Uh,
saying, bro. That's
uh,
crazy.
wow. Um. Well. On that note.
Bro, listen, no matter what the feds do, they can't take his Bitcoin. Because that is
That's right. They
untraceable,
can't.
bro.
They can't seize that shit, and they probably can't take his lira either. I was holding it back until you were about to until you were like gonna finish your thought, because I was like, oh, I just got the notification on my phone.
Damn, I gotta make some calls after this recording. There's some people I need to speak to.
Uh, so I guess go-
The picture on the NY Times, Eric
yeah.
Adams' indictment is so fucking funny. Any funny
Uh,
guy that tries to become mayor of New York, they take him down.
it's true. Uh, it's just the funniest thing was yesterday, one like the chief superintendent of like the schools like resigned a week after they seized his phone. So like he was like thinking about it for like a week. Like he was like, okay, they have my phone. Like, do I have bad things on my phone? Like, was he like thinking, like racing through his memory, like, oh, what do I have on my phone? And then he finally decided that he's just gonna step down. The picture.
All right,
Uh,
man. Robert
okay.
Altman.
Okay, so
um,
yeah, Fulton, you want to go?
we were talking about accessibility. If we wanted to finish up any thoughts on that, but if not, then we're all good.
Oh, I
Accessibility
mean,
to
yeah.
these two films, at least, because we were kind of talking about how hard it is to kind of get access to both these films, honestly, if you don't want to buy a Blu-ray.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like it's fucking crazy if you spend some time on Letterboxd what just being on the Criterion channel perennially can do for a movie.
Mhm.
Um, dude, it's crazy. I mean, like more people have seen the original British The Man Who Knew Too Much than Johnny Guitar or this
Mhm.
movie. It's crazy. Um, but it's just the way it is, full. It's just the
Yeah.
way it is.
It's sad. I mean, I have a Blu-ray copy of On Dangerous Ground, but it was more expensive than like, I mean, not
Yeah.
crazy, but it
And it's
wasn't
a
crazy expensive, but it's great. I mean, it should be more accessible, I think, too.
On Dangerous Ground is one of his best movies, but like it's only available on that bare bones Warner Archive release.
Mm.
A lot of his movies are on Blu-ray. I mean, even like the deep cuts, like Savage Innocence, or Run for Cover, they've gotten restorations and like they're out on Blu-ray. But it's like if you want to pay like $30 for whatever is left of the olive film stock of the
Hmm.
Savage Innocence, like it's kind of hard to watch.
Yeah,
Uh,
I've seen it.
that's a
Process.
wild movie.
Yeah, it's crazy. But I guess without further ado, we can start talking about Robert Altman's Thieves Like Us. Um, and it adopts the same name as the novel that both these films are adapted from. Um, and I guess just to get out some first impressions, I did take a new Hollywood class. I think I've talked about it on the podcast before, but it definitely like primed me to evaluate this film and probably get a little bit more out of it. But definitely like the Great Depression era setting and the general fatalism that kind of pushes this couple further and further, or is definitely very ripe for a new Hollywood film for sure. Um, and with a lot of the more sensational moments of this story and a lot of the romance of the story, I would personally argue in this film they're kind of undermined. They're played very straight, and not really pushed in the same way that I think those romantic moments are pushed in Ray's film. I guess that's kind of where my
Yeah.
mind is at on my first impression of it.
Yeah. I mean, me and Chris watched this film together, and about an hour in, I kind of was like, it's really interesting that this movie is kind of more interested in being like a homosocial hangout movie
Hmm.
with the bank robbers than it is at all with setting up the Bowie Kichi romance. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
the Nick Ray movie, him and Kichi are like locked in with each other by like 15 or 20 minutes in. And
Hmm.
like it's like a half hour before him and Kichi have a conversation here.
And now, to be
Um
fair, the film is 2 hours long as opposed to this one's They Live by Night is 95 minutes, so it's a longer film, so they're able to like pad it out, I think. But keyword pad, because I really I, I really appreciate the pacing of Ray's film much more than Altman's. That's not. I like Altman as a director. I'm not attacking the man, but I have a strong preference to Ray's picture for other
yeah, I
reasons
mean
too. Yeah.
this is the Ray movie is kind of all killer no filler. It is his Eminem lose yourself if you only had one shot moment. He he was 38, alcoholic, alimony to pay.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? This is the
Yeah.
B-side for Robert Altman. So there's a lot of kind of like low energy, like goof off stuff that like feels like the episodic hijinks of Matt or of MASH, where it's like, ooh, these guys are gonna play around the house and somebody's gonna get too drunk and be a little silly.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And that's what the padding is. And I mean, like, for some reason, when it's in MASH, people love it. But when it's 10 minutes in the middle of Thieves Like Us, certain people object to it.
Yeah. I've never seen MASH. I can't speak. I've only
Yeah,
seen the
neither have
TV
I.
show. Yeah.
Damn, you guys have never seen MASH? Okay.
Nah, I don't know. I'll get around to it one day, but I have
You
heard
should.
a
Yeah.
deterrent for me is people saying kind of what you said, like it's a little like it's not that funny, you know.
And well,
No,
there's
MASH is funny.
yeah.
Like, dude,
Yeah.
like drink like 4 beers and watch MASH. Like, what are we talking about here? Like, it's
I've
horrible. Like, it's morally reprehensible, but like, it's not funny.
So like to me, I guess I just see them both as trying to achieve two very different kind of things. And I agree, Vincent. Like it does seem way more interested in the kind of bandit group than actually Bowie and Kichi. And not to say that they don't give that relationship enough time on screen. It just feels really, really focused on that. And while I did say like the film isn't sensational, like in the filmmaking, like I mean, like it's not mining, like the heists aren't really shot in like a crazy way that like you typically would associate like a Hollywood film would capture them. It's kind of like one high angle looking down shot.
Yeah,
I
I'll
mhm,
be honest, Altman plants the camera down for
mhm.
durational takes a lot more here than you might think. There's still a couple of those, more than a couple of those like trademark zooms.
Yeah.
Um, but there's a lot of scenes that are one kind of unbroken shot. It feels like at least, but maybe that might just be because Chris is right, and this movie might be a little freaking boring.
I mean,
Uh,
it's slow, but like, well, because I was saying that because really the only time with my assessment of it, the only time where that is not true is the very end, which I know we'll get to that. But I think that is kind of like a stylistic thing, but it also does kind of tie into my reading of it as a new Hollywood film. But I have more ideas on the latter half of the film. I really like the latter half of the film.
yeah.
I don't dislike the beginning. I found more interesting things going on in the latter half compared to the beginning. But you know,
I I think also part of the thing that's interesting here is that in some ways this movie is more interested in being a piece of the Depression and really spending some time to feel out the period
mhm.
um, compared to the Nicholas Ray film. And the interesting thing to think about in perspective between these two films is that there was a script for this film, but Robert Altman got a hold of it and kind of was like, I don't know. And him and Joan Tewksbury, who wrote Nashville, rewrote it all. And it's really
Mhm.
interesting to see this film that was largely written by a woman with some input from Robert Altman, from what I understand about their collaborative process. I could be wrong. Um, is far more focused on the homosocial aspect, kind of like Lee Brackett writing High Noon or something, right? And El Dorado as well. But the Nicholas Ray film, written by Nicholas Ray largely, or at least the first couple treatments before it got kind of turned into formatting by someone else, is interested in Kichi foremost.
it, yeah. Or
Almost
just
delving into weird chauvinism at times with Kichi. To be fair, I hate when people do. I hate God that fucking Andy Hardy series where 4 times an episode you guys would be like, I know this isn't very woke of Andy Hardy, but he does something that's a little weird by modern standards. Like every time. Man, if I had a nickel, you at least could have bought me a pack of fucking gum, man, after 8 episodes, you know?
Yeah, well,
Um,
Andy Hardy,
It just
he never did say that he was that Carvel was on Cherokee.
yeah. But there's that where like Kichi is like talking about, and it is kind of true to like teenage puppy love, but her like weird monologue that's like, you know, a woman's like a good dog, you know, some dogs, their master dies, they won't eat, you know, they'll bite anyone that tries to touch them. That's me. I'm your dog, you know. I guess in some ways it's cool that Nicholas Ray, you know, beat Iggy Pop to the punch by 30 years, but I watched that. I was like, man, that's weird. That's definitely a 35-year-old man writing that.
Yeah.
It, it's and also just how Ray, like, yeah, he's so much more, the melodrama is just, so
It's
much more play.
hysterical.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, and I love that. And it's like, yeah, like the Altman film is not interested in such
Yeah.
hysterics. Yeah.
By and large, it seems like Keith Carradine and Shelley Duvall, who, by the way, if you guys don't know, this one stars Keith Carradine and Shelley Duvall.
Yeah.
Um, we haven't mentioned that yet.
Yeah, we actually have it.
Who look much more like kind of like dumb Okies than like swarthy ethnic like 5'8" Farley Granger and like
Mhm.
Irish round faced Kathy O'Donnell. Um, all love to the both of them. Great magnetic screen presence. They look much more like Depression era faces. But this version of Bowie and Kichi, they only seem to fall into bed with one another because they finished drinking their cokes and like there's not anything else to do. Like, it really almost seems like they only fall in love because, like, well, man, like, there's no
You're around.
TV.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I
when
did.
which,
yeah, yeah,
but
when
it
he's
still
like,
believes in their love to an extent, but it is like
Mhm.
cynical.
I want you to stay over so we can you want to stay up and over at my place we can listen to the radio together.
Yeah, but and they are more infantilized here. They act more like children. They
Oh
play
yeah.
silly games.
Yeah.
And They Live by Night, Kathy O'Donnell and Farley Granger look like they're 17 years old, meet each other, and within like 3 days, they're like talking about how they want to buy a house and they're going out to nightclubs together and having cocktails.
Mhm.
Like these are two people that have never held hands in a movie before, and they're immediately trying to be grown up.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Keith Carradine and Shelley Duvall look like they're 32 years old and are sitting in bed making funny noises with their
Kichi kichi
mouths.
coo. Bowie Bowie boo.
Yeah.
While he's got the Rowley Diary of a Wimpy Kid bowl cut.
Yeah. It's they're such a weird couple. Like I do completely agree. And I think that's part of like what's a little hard for me at the beginning is because I don't really believe in their romance all that much. But I do find it funny. I don't have statistics on how many Cokes were sold during the Great Depression, but holy fuck, there's so much Coke
They're
in this
drinking a lot of
movie.
darn
There's,
Coca-Cola, man.
yeah, and like Shelley Duvall and Keith Carradine are like putting them down, like, oh, I'll get a
And the
nickel
cigarettes
later.
too, man.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
Here's the thing. It comes to the end of the month for me. I'm trying not to smoke too many cigarettes because it adds up. I can't
Mhm.
imagine in the Great Depression being a 2 pack a day smoker, man.
I
Yeah, no,
know.
it's crazy.
But yeah.
I mean, just to speak on kind of their relationship, I do find it very funny because I in my head like Altman is like pounding you on the head with where their relationship is gonna go, but during the sex scene, like it just keeps going, cutting to and Romeo and Juliet consummate their marriage with an interview, and that like same like sound clip plays like three times. It's going over the radio. I just thought that was very funny. It was a
Yeah.
little tongue in cheek.
I mean, occasionally you get those kind of like new wave-ish, like goofball moments from Robert Altman. You see that in some of the earlier stuff, like the shorts, like Pot of Foo. He's kind of Robert Altman has the sneaky Brian De Palma disease, where he tried to be a little bit more out there than a lot of the more famous works. I mean, you kind of see
Mhm.
it like Brewster McCloud. He finally gets it out of his system a little bit. Um, I was talking with Chris, and he kind of said I was full of shit a little bit, just from his silence. But for me, this one feels kind of like the B side to like McCabe and Mrs. Miller because they're both kind of like brown toned, like death marches with just like this kind of like dumb couple that like Altman kind of holds in contempt.
Mhm.
Um, and it just ends horribly, and she's just left alone. It's pretty much the exact same structure. It's the same sheen. The only difference is that it doesn't have the best parts of McCabe and Mrs. Miller, which is the Leonard Cohen songs and Warren
Mhm.
Beatty and Julie Christie instead of B players.
Mhm.
Um, but it feels like he's kind of working in that same zone. Um,
My rebuttal to what Vincent was saying when when we watched Thieves Like Us the other night was that what makes McCabe and Mrs. Miller a different film compared to this is it plays with the American mythology a lot more, and it also like has that going on top of the amazing Leonard Cohen soundtrack. But this doesn't really deal with that as much, and I think that's what makes me not really consider it similar to McCabe and Mrs. Miller.
I don't think you give it enough credit because it is interpreting because I mean, really, you go back to the Lovers on the Run thing. Like this is a remake of They Live by Night. They Live by Night's like an early Hollywood example, but really the first one is about 10 years earlier with Fritz Lang's You Only Live Once, which I watched today in preparation for this podcast. Fantastic film. Anyone listening, it's 86 minutes long, and it has some of the most stunning images and one of my favorite Henry Fonda performances I've seen thus far. That's the first Bonnie and Clyde adaptation. So simply by the virtue of being a Bonnie and Clyde sort of archetype, this movie is engaging with a core American myth. And it kind of like when I was thinking about it, it does the same thing as like a movie like John Jost Hold Up, which is not that great but has some really great scenes, and Wanda. Like these are the same sort of like it's like okay, let's do Bonnie and Clyde, but actually like these couples are kind of like dumb and like thrown together by circumstance. Because even in Bonnie and Clyde, like Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway are like kind of like sexy and charming, and then They Live
Yeah.
by Night, like and then in even in Badlands, it's a little bit different. But like here, it's like look at these dolts, look at these oaky dolts. Because at the end of the day, Robert Altman was a coastal elite. He was like this dumb, pot-bellied coastal elite that thought he was better than Nashville. He thought he was better than these Mississippi idiots. Um,
Yeah.
and he had to go
Okay.
back to his pool, man.
That's you make a compelling argument. But still I just wish I just wish I liked the movie more. I it's because of of Bonnie and Clyde adaptations or something that play
Yeah,
things that play with the Bonnie and Clyde mold. There's just you listed films that are
yeah,
much
this is
better.
the worst. I mean, the only thing that might be better than that I can think of off top is the Gun Crazy remake.
Yeah,
Because it's
I
not
which
this is not better than Gun Crazy,
I
which
which
is
I haven't even seen. That's the one with Drew Barrymore, right?
yeah.
Yeah, oh, man, gun.
We can't cover that. She's a scab.
Yeah,
We just
Yup.
can't do
yeah, we
that.
just can't even
Yeah.
mention that
Yup.
that
We
movie exists.
Can we censor it? Beep. Just block it out.
Yeah, so anyways, this reminds me of that Elia Kazan movie.
Yeah.
Um,
I I guess just are we ready to kind of talk about the final kind of last act of this movie?
um,
Yeah, sure.
yeah, sure.
Um and what so like to me I do find like the latter half of the film to be kind of concerned with legacy, but in a very like muddied way, and I'm still trying to kind of figure out what exactly Altman is trying to say. I mean, it's the same thing with all the other movies that you guys listed, like the idea of yourself being reported to as like a mass media figure is also a part of like the Bonnie and Clyde like mythos as well. But I thought it was kind of interesting that Chickamauga is concerned with how he looks in comparison to how Bowie looks like in the US mass media. And then there's also this kind of talk about children that Kichi and Bowie have, where it seems like Bowie has never really considered having children. And then she's like, "What do you like? So do you want kids?" And he's like, Maybe." Like it's a weird conversation, but then like this idea that having children is a way to continue your legacy once you pass away is like something that's brought up throughout the film to me. And I find it interesting that um, at the end of the film, it follows the same kind of plot as They Live by Night, where Kichi gets pregnant. But the way that Kichi reacts in Thieves Like Us is very different in comparison, um, because she kind of. I read the final moments with Kichi, where she is about to board a train. She's just talking to like um, a lady at the train station. She's like, "Oh no, I'm not naming him after Bowie. He was like a shitheel, I think she calls him, or something like that." She's like, "He's not going to be anything like his father or something like that." And so it's like this completely like uh, just fatalistic with how sensationally the death scene of Bowie was shot, and then to also have it to where his legacy won't be
Yeah.
continued at all. And I
But
mean,
it's not even like,
obviously.
but that's even more like kind of like a normie, like lame, because it's like, oh yeah, the cycle's broken. Actually,
Mhm.
like she's gonna be like a badass single mom in Dallas, Texas, in
Mhm.
the Depression. And yeah, this kid's gonna turn out awesome. You know,
Yeah. I mean, I find
because
it
the
funny. Mhm.
yeah, it's funny, but like, and that's the interesting thing is a lot of these Nicholas Ray movies, like essentially like most of them end, it's like, oh man, like we flubbed it. Like the cycle of pain continues.
Mhm.
Like, you know, Rebel Without a Cause ends with Natalie Wood and James Dean standing in the same position as their impotent parents and having to walk off and like, oh fuck, we've made another broken family. You know, in a
Mhm.
lonely place, the relationship is ruined. I mean, really, you could argue Johnny Guitar is the happiest Nicholas Ray film, but at the end of They Live by Night, it's like it's all, you know, Kathy O'Donnell's face is consumed by blackness in the
Yeah.
final moments. There's nothing. There's no hope. Meanwhile,
Hmm.
here she walks off, and there's a little bit of winking irony with the Father Coughlin address,
Mhm.
which honestly doesn't make sense to me. That it just is kind of a weird period flourish that doesn't connect to the rest of it, which is why I say it's sometimes more interested in being a period piece, but it has no substantive weight to the ways it accents that. While in They Live by Night, it's kind of the backbone and also the flourishes is that Nicholas Ray understands that setting, and
Mhm.
you know, for the heads, you know, if you're a real Woody Guthrie fan, you might get a little something here and there.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, unless you're a fan of somewhat enduring reactionary politics from the Great Depression, you know, it's not like that Father Coughlin Easter egg. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it's an MCU style Easter egg. And you get stay till after the credits, folks. Actually, if you the post credit sequence in McCabe, he meets William Jennings Bryan. That's actually what happens if you stay after the McCabe is that William Jennings Bryan shows up and is like, I'm gonna fix this.
That would be so sick. He's like, yeah, that is something that's true. Like uh, uh about Thieves Like Us, which I almost called Small Time Crooks, in my head, but
Honestly, maybe a more fun movie to watch.
yeah,
I love Small Time Crooks. It's not a good movie. So funny, man.
uh, yeah, yeah, that's actually what we're doing next week. We're talking about late Woody Allen. But
Listen, if you don't have me on for that eventual discussion, there have to be multiple guests for that. There are multiple worthy guests, but
oh yeah.
come on.
I
Who else
I
rocks
was
with the Curse of the Jade Scorpion like me?
a roundtable discussion about Melinda and Melinda.
Honestly, a pretty good movie.
Oh, I would I'm not going to agree with you there. But I think what I was going to say about Thieves Like Us was that flourish of like just kind of the radio always being on. I did appreciate, even if it's just kind of like this, honing in on the period piece, like kind of continuing to like reiterate that
Yeah, but that's
it's the
also in They
depression.
Live by Night. That's in the
Oh,
same thing. Like, there's not really any score in They Live by Night, no?
no, 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 there
Mm.
isn't. there isn't,
And then
but
the radio plays pretty like, with some frequency throughout the film.
yeah, but I just feel like it's even more prominent in Thieves Like
Yeah, I
Us.
mean,
It's
Robert
yeah,
Altman lays it on thick because
yeah.
he's in, you know, third gear at most here. And you know what? The interesting thing about this one too is that the final scene is that in They Live by Night, the way it's staged, the sort of final, the climax. I mean, it's a Bonnie and Clyde story. We know what happens. It's kind of different, and here it almost kind of feels like self-consciously imitating the Arthur Penn climax
Yeah.
in the way it pays off the blood, and it's the stationary ambush.
Mm.
Maybe it's truer to the novel, and I don't know. I mean, whenever I see a house getting shot up in a movie, I think about Heaven's Gate, and I think about this isn't as good as Heaven's Gate.
Mm.
But this one
Yeah.
definitely feels like, oh, this is like a post Arthur Penn Bonnie and Clyde movie, and They Live by Night is something of its own. Um, and this is ironic of me to say because before recording, I said, let's talk about these movies on their own terms, boys.
Eh,
Let's
yeah.
not talk about this in
Yeah.
comparison.
Yeah, it when you're talking about remake and original, it's
It's
especially
hard.
with our the fact that our series is based around that, it is hard to I wish we could have been able to judge the Get Carter Stallone remake
I don't
on
think we
its
would have
own
gotten
term.
much out of it, if not in comparison to the original.
It would have been a better episode than the Joseph L. Mankiewicz and whoever did the '90s Miramax, The Quiet American.
Hey, I'm
Uh,
still down. You tell me when, and I'm down.
Did you know? So did you know that Thieves Like Us and California Split both came out the same year for Altman?
Oh.
Um,
Hmm.
That's a
uh,
that's a pretty good year.
yeah, I mean, I definitely I prefer California Split. I think that's pretty good time, pretty good hang. But yeah, and this was sandwiched right between The Long Goodbye and Nashville. So
Yeah,
big
Not
and
bad.
shouts,
the funny thing is, I think it was Pauline Kael called this like the closest thing that Altman's made to a masterpiece. Which, like, I
bruh.
guess, like, this is like the closest he made up to that point in like the mature style of like a conventional Hollywood narrative movie
Yeah.
Hmm.
that like was executed. There aren't many unforced errors here, even if there's some padding.
E-
And
Did she like
so,
Nashville?
well, Pauline Kael's most famous breakout review is Bonnie and Clyde. That's what made her
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
career, which
yeah,
yeah,
also kind of
yeah.
makes it funny to be like, oh, this is Robert Altman's masterpiece. I mean, Pauline
Interesting.
Kael, no fan of Nicholas Ray. I forget who told it. There's some story where when Nicholas Ray was teaching at NYU in the final years of his life before he got the cancer diagnosis, him and Pauline Kael went out to lunch together. And immediately this broad goes through his filmography front to back and says, oh, couple of good shots in this one. This one, no good. And Nicholas Ray is just sitting there like he's already pathetic, like he's broke, he's like living in a loft in a bed that is just a mattress on a floor with his like 25-year-old wife, and he's just got his face hung in his shrimp and rice, while Pauline Kael is like failure of a career, movie by movie. Um,
Damn.
Yeah,
You'll see that a lot with American film critics. They didn't
well,
like Nicholas very much.
Hmm.
and you know what Robert Altman had to say to Pauline Kael after she penned those reviews? He said, "Pauline,
All my haters become my waiters when I sit down at the table of success."
I guess we'll just quickly, which film did you prefer? For me, it goes without saying, They Live by Night. Easily one of my favorite films of the 40s. So, yeah.
I guess I will also do Live by Night. Although I do like both, I do like both. But yeah, I do think They Live by Night is a stronger picture overall.
Yeah, I think I'll also say that They Live by Night is probably better than a Robert Altman B-side. Um, Yeah. I honestly, if you want to do two Bonnie and Clyde movies from the studio, do You Only Live Once, Fritz Lang. Really, and you know, kind of an interesting counterpoint because they're only on the run for the last 20 minutes and it's an hour of society wronging them beforehand. So really, really great movie. But yeah, They Live by Night.
Well, thanks for coming on, Vincent, and we'll definitely have you on again to talk about
This
something
trial
else.
that's
Yeah.
happening
Yeah,
soon.
we're pivoting to the Eric Adams
Listen,
criminal proceedings.
listen, I've been telling you the true crime pivot is coming. Like I sent you the Diddy outline podcast 43 Freak Off episode.
Yeah, well,
Eric Adams episode
We'd
number
have to
2.
get 50 Cent on somehow,
we're
some way. Like we'd have
well,
to.
well, actually, we'll be having Alan Dershowitz on next week, and he's going to be pleading Diddy's case to us.
Could we, when we title the episode, could we do, They Live by Night / Thieves Like
Thieves
Us
Like Us
/ Eric Adams
/
indictment
Eric Adams
/ P.
indictment
Diddy
live
claims?
reaction.
Uh,
Yeah, just stay safe. Um,
Wow, Chris, stay wavy.
stay with me. And especially stay safe if you're the mayor of New York City. So, all right. Peace.